Okay, hello everybody. Hopefully there are some people on. We're just going to wait a couple of minutes. We've got VB from OpenAI joining us. He's just moving meeting rooms. And so yeah, if you just want to say hi on the chat and maybe tell me where you are and what the temperature is at the moment. If you're in Europe, I'm sure that's a topic of most conversations. And then in a couple of minutes, we'll get started.
Hey, Tom.
Hey, VB. How you doing?
Pretty good. How's it going?
Good, good. Okay. I can see you have one person from the USA, so they're probably dodging the European heat.
Nice.
Is it nice and cool in the OpenAI offices?
It is. I've got the AC set to as low as possible. So all locked and loaded for the chat today.
Okay. Only 26 degrees C in Edinburgh. Oh, to live in Scotland. I would love that. Strasbourg 40.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Okay, I think that's going to win.
Bad.
Yeah. Ouch. Ouch. I think I'm at 30 something, but yeah. Cool. All right. How many minutes past? We're 3 minutes past. Okay. David from Massachusetts. 68 Fahrenheit in Utah. What's that Fahrenheit thing?
Yeah.
Sounds cool anyway. I think that's good. Anything under 70. Cool. Okay, another 40 degrees in France. Yikes. Right. Okay. So let's get started. So welcome to the webinar. We're going to be, we have VB from OpenAI with us. We're also going to have Dennis Troller, who's the product manager, who's going to be on the Q&A. So if you have any questions as we go, please put them in the Q&A tab. And when we get to the end, hopefully we won't rabbit on for too long and there'll be some time and we can answer your questions there. But I think also Dennis will answer questions online, and he's the product manager for most of a lot of what we're talking about today on the Sonar side anyway. And then obviously, I guess VB can answer some questions on the OpenAI and Codex side. So yeah, we're going to sort of chat a bit about what's been going on. Hopefully some of you saw us talking at the Sonar Summit, I think 3 months ago now. And obviously things have moved on a lot in 3 months. It's like 3 years in real time. And yeah, so we'll kind of see where we are, and then we're going to go into a demo in Codex and see how Sonar and Codex work together. So VB, do you want to give a quick intro?
Sure. First of all, hello everyone, wherever you're joining from. I am VB. I'm part of the developer experience team at OpenAI, and I get to do, in my opinion, one of the coolest jobs out there, which is to work with startups, enterprises, developers like all of you, and bring them the magic of Codex as well as our GPT series of models closer to them, and help them solve some of the most important and crucial problems of our today's world. And I've been at OpenAI for about 6 months and have been solely focused on Codex.
Cool. Amazing, thank you. And I think probably if you haven't seen me doing Sonar stuff before, I'm Tom Howlett, Director of AI Engineering Engagement, and it's a kind of similar role to VB's role, to be honest. But I'm going out talking to developers about AI adoption and using Sonar. So VB, a few questions to start with. It's been 3 months since the last time we chatted. What's been happening at OpenAI?
Wow, lots. I believe last time when we chatted, we were still at maybe 5.2 Codex.
I think 5.3 was just about to come out. In fact, yes. By the time the recording came out, I think maybe it was out. Yeah.
Yes. So there's lots happened both on the way people interact with the models as well as on the model side, right? So let's take it step by step. On the model side, we went from 5.2 Codex to 5.3 Codex, and from there on to 5.4 and now 5.5. And what we've seen is from like 5.2 codex all the way till 5.5, the amount of things that you can do with the model, or just by prompting the model and letting the model sort of get as much context around the problem that you want to solve, um, has just sort of like increased in like really sort of step changes, right? um, what I mean by that is, before you would have to sort of carefully curate your agents.md, you would have to carefully curate your prompt, you would have to give a lot of context to the model about the problem that it's trying to solve, right? Whilst now from like 5.2 codex to 5.5, you can in most cases just like send a screenshot and be like, fix this, and the model is high agency enough to sort of like look through all the live data sources, your different MCP sources, maybe it a Sonar source, maybe it has GitHub, whatever it may be, and try and form a very good sort of body of experience around the problem itself, right, and solve for it. And I think as these sort of like models started to become really, really good, we realized that we need to provide a way that developers, startups, enterprises, everyone essentially needs a way for them to truly harness the capabilities of these models. Um, and what if, and that quickly sort of started becoming the Codex app, right? So the app that we're gonna sort of see today as well, it's one of our sort of most used surface at this point for using GPT series models for coding, as well as like normal busy work tasks as well. And we've gone from having like a seemingly good but less performant surface to now like really high performance, as well as very feature rich surface which can connect to all the tools that you want to connect to. Maybe that is Slack, maybe that is SonarQube, maybe that is GitHub, Figma, whatever it may be, wherever you work, Codex is now able to sort of like work with it, right, or like connect to it. And second, it is able to sort of like work on multiple projects all at the same time, right? And we'll do a deep dive of this as we go into the demo and so on. But generally speaking, to sort of summarize, models have become much better, and at the same time, the surfaces that you can use to maximally use these models have also become good.
Yeah. Actually, this morning I was doing some benchmarking. So I was testing out some different prompts and kind of running them lots of different times. And I had 10 sessions running at once. And I suddenly got all the notifications coming up on my Mac saying like security, there's something going on in your security problem on your thing. And I was like, oh, I'm not sure. I was worried, right? And then I get an email from our security team saying, this was the error, and I could see straight away it was something that the model was doing, as part of this benchmark, and it had basically thought that the computer was out of control. So I'm like, oh God, how do I explain this to the security team? And so I just asked the agent. I was like, can you help me explain? Here's what the security team was sent me. Can you help me explain? And they obviously like listed out all that, this is why it looked like an attack, this is what it would have triggered in the security software, and explained the whole thing through. I was just like you say, the agency of these models is incredible now, right? The sheer variety, and we're only just discovering like exactly what they can and can't do, and then it's changing all the time as well.
Yeah. And I mean, just to sort of like tug on the last point, right, the fact that you can just ask the model to look at what it's done so far, what it can learn from other sessions, or just like connections that it has, be it live, be it stale, whatever it may be. I feel like that's something which has like really led to a lot of developer productivity increases, right? A lot of the times, even within our team, we have a code base written in TypeScript. We've got a bunch of Rust. The whole Codex CLI itself is written in Rust. At the same time, we've got a bunch of Python code bases, and like it's just like everyone's sort of like doing their own thing, right? And a lot of the times, there is a bunch of logic which is just hidden in like these really sort of bespoke files or functions and like abstractions and so on and so forth. And I find myself spending a lot of time just like asking Codex, like, hey, like, why are we doing this? Like, what is the logic behind this particular way of solving this thing? and oftentimes just to use it to refine my thoughts on a particular topic as well, right? And it's it's pretty nice because Codex itself would educate itself on and like sort of like formulate a, as I said before, like a body of experience around that particular topic itself, and can do it much faster and so on.
Yeah. And I guess on the Sonar side, we've come quite a way. I think when we were talking before, we were talking about these new tools that we were developing, which then went alpha and are now beta. So we've got customers using our context augmentation tool, our agentic analysis tool through the CLI and the MCP. I think maybe the move from MCP to CLI was just starting to happen, and now it's kind of everything you see today mostly will be through the CLI. And we've got plugins, now got a Codex plugin, which is great, and that's what we're going to show today. And yeah, this stuff is getting close to coming out GA, and so and being available for all our products. So lots going on there, but I guess I'm going to demo it, so I won't talk about it too much. So, cool. So what about customers? So what are you hearing out in the field? How are kind of particularly enterprises getting on with Codex? And do you see any kind of thing around code quality and those sort of areas? I guess that's where a lot of our people are going to be interested today.
Right. I think so. First of all, the demand for these coding agents has been sort of like increasing in like an exponential manner, right? Each sort of like month over month, if you look at how an average industry is using coding agents, is just increasing. There's nothing stopping that trend, right? What that means is that as the sort of marginal cost of creating code sort of goes down to zero, your sort of cost of maintaining that code sort of inversely keeps on increasing, right? And this is where like a lot of tools like Sonar, as well as just your own bespoke sort of like validation logics, right, or like just linter checks, whatever it may be, right, all of these sort of come together over there, right? And it's super important because, as I said before, we're in the world wherein you can go from zero to like a fully functional app in like 5 minutes, right? But whether or not that app, that service, that API, whether or not it is sort of like production ready is like your single point of failure, right? And so we're seeing a lot of companies sort of like optimizing for that specific thing right now, which is to like set their own employees as well as their own teams, and just creating these sort of tools, having like a framework in place to make sure that the coding agent itself has the room to try and experiment with different things. But at the end of the day, whatever output it produces, it has like some sort of a contained output and like a range where it can be, right? And something which is quite sort of which has been super interesting for me is that typically you would see like a lot of regulated industries, like financial industries, as well as healthcare industries and so on. They would be quite hesitant in adopting new technology, understandably so, because of the stakes involved over there. And they are actually able to move much faster than any other industry, just because of how rigorous their testing suits and their validation logics have been, right? And like at the start of the year, if you would have told me that some of the largest banks are now like running day-long sort of refactors, week-long refactors just on like Codex itself, of course using tools like Sonar and so on, I would not believe it, right? Like fully autonomous. But now something that was probably like their single point of failure has become one of the biggest strengths in them.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, isn't it? The verification has always been strong in those industries, and actually, so that's actually given them a leg up in this situation. Yeah, I think I mean, for a lot of customers I've seen, they've seen instant wins just on the internal apps, and they're kind of nervous. They're still a bit nervous on their big production apps kind of thing, and also a little more cautious there. But I think the tooling that's coming in, really thinking about the AI SDLC and what that kind of looks like. Obviously, if they have a lot of automation already, which a lot of the big banks already do, that's great, right? But if they didn't have so much automation and they were relying on human code review, that's becoming a real bottleneck now, right? As they're developing more code. So this kind of need for more automation around verification is important, yeah. And we'll talk a bit about setting the right context as well today, so that you get the right good quality code. So I guess on that, I mean, how do you see the developer role kind of changing? I mean, presumably we're all seeing people with less time typing code. What's that being replaced with?
I think this is like sort of like slightly, controversial or whatever you may call it. I do think that the amount of impact a person can have has sort of like increased manifold times just from the start of the year from now, right? And if we were to maybe just to contextualize this, let's take like a step back in time, maybe 2 years back. We were in a paradigm wherein we would essentially be prompting or like writing, I would say maybe like 70 to 80% of the code by ourselves. And then we would use, some sort of like autocomplete, maybe in IntelliJ, maybe in, VS Code, Cursor, and so on and so forth. I still remember those days. I would just like write, def train, and then like it would complete the function. I'd be like, wow, this is what living in the future is like, right? And we went from there to, people, including me, going on chatgpt.com and just like typing down here, like, I want a function for this. And like ChatGPT would give you like a function, you copy paste it. And then, you go at it to all the way to maybe like 6 or 8, or maybe like even like a year back, right? We started seeing this rise of CLIs, right? Which is where we saw the early signs of people being able to delegate, writing an entire file or writing an entire, boilerplate of a particular project, and so on and so forth. Now, fast forward from that phase to now, we are seeing that, of course, you can work on one project at one time, but why stop there? You can also work at multiple projects all at the same time. In fact, you can also work on multiple features all at the same time, right? And the role of the developer has gone from sort of like implement, like, not just like thinking about the code, but also implementing the code, but also testing the code, and so on and so forth, to now sort of like really like thinking about how to solve a particular problem and just like kicking off a bunch of agent tasks to see what that would look like. And oftentimes sort of like thinking on the other side whether or not the said solution makes sense. If not, then what should be the sort of, iteration on that, right? And of course, you then need like a lot of tools to give you the power as well as the agency to make that decision faster. And I'm personally quite bullish on the fact that we're truly like now bounded by creativity of an individual person, right? So you don't need to test the person on their ability on whether or not they can write a regular expression to find an email that matches a particular criteria or whatnot. But now you're truly bounded by how far you can push these models to sort of do the set task that you want to do, all whilst being cognizant of the fact that you want your code to sort of fit certain paradigms, certain restrictions, and so forth. But at the same time, I'm quite curious to hear your take on that as well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I guess for me, when I was a developer, I spent a lot of time pair programming, like about 10 years of everyday pair programming, which I kind of loved. I always liked that interaction with someone else, that collaboration, kind of working through a problem. I'm much better working through a problem with other people. And now I had to do that with an agent, which is great, right? We're kind of like iterating on solutions. We're coming up with designs. I often ask agents to come up with something like 3 different options, and then we'll discuss the different options and the trade-offs involved. So I feel like on one side you've got where you're making very critical decisions. The agent is really good at going and getting the data, suggesting ideas, and you creatively work through the problem. And then on the other side, on the more boring stuff, like potentially fixing fairly trivial bugs and things, you can just set it off and let it work. And obviously you need to verify, but actually increasingly getting rid of the boring stuff, doing the interesting, but actually having a good kind of muse to kind of work with, and actually a very smart developer to work with, right? An increasingly smart developer to work with on it. And I think you'll see the agent has a certain amount of context that it's got. You've got a certain amount of context, and I think that collaboration is really good, right? And the developers, especially as a senior developer that's been working on a code base for a while, will have experience that potentially the agent can't see. So there's a kind of good interaction, a good kind of collaboration between the two. So yeah, I kind of enjoy it. I think it looks good for developers from that perspective. But we'll see how it goes. I hope people don't just try to take developers out of the equation and automate it all. I don't think that's going to happen, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think it's like, I think I'm personally quite bullish on the fact that we'll just see these like productivity gains sort of like increase and like compound over time, right? And I couldn't be more bullish on the future than now. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so I think we should get into some actual coding. I think I like that thing that you should never work with children and animals or AI. And today we're going to work with AI and see what it does when it's actually under a demo situation and everyone's watching. So this should be fun. So let me share my screen.
Amazing.
And I'm sure this is going to be fun. Right. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see Codex. The Codex app as well. I must admit, I've been using the CLI in VS Code quite a lot, and we chatted a little while ago, and you were like, no, try the app. And actually, I'm now really into the app, and I keep discovering really cool features in the app. So yeah, is there anything you want to say about the app before we we'll go in, and then we'll talk about the plugins and things?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's like, to be honest, when I joined the Codex team itself, back in December, I used to be a hardcore CLI fan. Like, I was like, it's the way to go. I can have like, my workflow of like how I do things. I would have multiple terminals, working on different projects and so on and so forth. And maybe about 10 or 15 days or maybe even like a month before we actually released the app, I started dogfooding the app. And I was like, sure, like, let's just give it a shot. What's the harm? And after the first day or two, I started, sort of like naturally like drifting towards the app quite a lot, right? Just because there's just something about immediately seeing what your agent is doing, and sort of be able to sort of go across multiple threads, multiple projects, and from then to now, the ability to be able to connect to Slack, to be able to connect to Google Calendar, and just be able to manage my entire life all from like one app, has personally been a game changer, right? I get bombarded with emails and with my Twitter DMs, with my LinkedIn DMs, and I want to make sure that I try and get to all of those within a week, right? And so I have like a bunch of these sort of like automations who would like flag the most important message, the most important emails that I should like quickly respond to. It would also go beyond just like helping me to code, to proactively, sending me reminders about, hey, like there is this like particular sort of person that you should meet. You told me in my debrief earlier this week to like do that, and so on. And so it's been quite a game changer, both within OpenAI as well as like externally. It is our most used surface, and in fact, to the point of it being most used surface, when we released the Codex app, to our surprise, within the first week itself, we had more than 1 million downloads, right, of the app itself, and that's all within 1 week. So it's we've definitely seen like a very good product market fit with it, and a lot of people doing some really crazy stuff with it.
It is super cool. Yes, yeah. I think we could just dig into your personal workflow, I think, but we should probably avoid that for this webinar. I think that will be good. So in the app, we have on this left-hand side, obviously, new chats. We have projects, and I'll get into this project in a little bit. But plugins are a big deal, right? And there's a whole load that are available there. Computer use and Chrome. I think you were talking a bit about that when we were in before. But we have the Sonar plugin, the SonarQube plugin in there, which I've added. Just look at the documentation on how to add it, because it's not yet in the OpenAI store, but it should be whitelisted soon. And so, yeah, here it is. And there's all the different skills that come with it. In fact, there's a few more skills than you can see here, but there's some great things like fix issues, listing issues, projects, coverage, analyzing. So all of those plugins are there. Anything about the plugin store? Otherwise, I'll jump across to SonarQube.
I think it's without like spending too much time on the store itself, we're working around the clock to add as many plugins as we can, right? There's chances are, if you want to do something, and if there's a tool that you work with, there would already be a plugin for it, right? And what I like about Codex is that if you want to create a plugin for something that doesn't exist, you can just ask Codex to create it. It already has the skills, quite literally necessary to create the plugin that you want. And something maybe a bit meta is that at the end of each week, I ask Codex to essentially look at all my sessions from that week and look at all the projects that I've contributed to, my PRs, also Slack messages, Google Docs, everything. Like I give it all the context and I'm like, hey, like what are some things that you can automate in this week? And there are some like personal skills that I've built. It would just like skills and plugins for it, and it would just make them better week over week. So it's like, it's kind of got like the, like a very primitive sense of, continual learning, where like it would just learn from my sessions week over week. And now I've gotten to like some workflows, which I just don't even think about, right? And this is by and large possible by plugins and skills, and the ability of Codex to look through all of these tools, again, using plugins and skills. So yeah.
That's crazy, isn't it? Our future is just going to be interacting with agents.
Yeah.
Going forward, isn't it? It's like, it's already happening. Okay, so I'll jump to this project. I think if you've seen my demos before, you might have seen this project. So this is GC Toolkit, which has got a nice architecture. It's quite a big open source project, and we've got a fork of it here. And so I'll quickly just run through this project. It's on new code, it's passing. It's got a whole bunch of older issues. It's got 52% coverage. As you see from the architecture, it's quite a complex architecture. There's quite a lot going on for a relatively small thing. So we can dig right in. If you haven't seen this architecture feature, I think there was a webinar on it last week, but we're going to be using that a bit today as well. And we're going to be doing a refactoring. So we'll be changing some of this architecture. So that's the current architecture. I've got an intended architecture set up here, which is how, some constraints I want on the architecture. It's showing a few deviations from the intended architecture. And actually, we've got things like in the reporting, the measures, we've got sort of what's the technical debt look like on this project at the moment. So we'll jump back to this later. So let's go back to and create a new chat. Now, before we start, I'm just going to ask it about like, where are we starting from, right? What are the principles? Now, I've created an agent MD here with some kind of developer principles. So if we just say your development principles, this project, and we'll see what we get there. Now, it's jumping into a work tree. We were going to talk about work trees, and I've overstepped there. Tell us about work trees, VB.
So the way I sort of explain working with work trees is that, of course, when you're working with a project, you've got some sort of Git history associated with it, right? And you want to use Git because it gives your coding agent the ability to commit, uncommit, check out certain changes, go into one branch, create a new branch. And it's practically impossible to work on anything meaningful without having some sort of like a Git initialized project. So step one, you've got a Git initialized project. But as you start to go from one feature to working on two features at the same time, you would start to see that since the Git sort of status and the overall history as well as current state is shared between the two features, your coding agent will start to get confused between what change is being made in one thread versus the another, right? And and this is where sort of work trees come in place. When you create a work tree, it would create a copy of like whatever has happened in the Git history so far, and just create another sort of like isolated copy of it. And the idea there is that you can work on multiple projects all in isolation, sorry, multiple different features all in isolation with each other, right? And this is particularly handy because you can, once you're done building all of these features, you can collapse them in one, or you can have like a merge order for those, or just use it. For example, something that I quite enjoy doing for like new projects is to just let some agents really initialize them with different prompts, and then have them attempt a problem in 6 or 7 different ways.
Yeah.
And then you have like 7 copies that you can then just iterate around, just like check out one work tree and then go for it.
Yeah, I think the beauty of them, they've got their own they've got their own environment,
yes,
right? So they're working on their own, whereas you don't have to be switching branches. You can have multiple things with changed untracked code across, and in fact, each of these like chats here have got their own work tree, and I've just got into the habit of doing that.
Exactly.
And then when we're done, you can then create a proper branch out of that and create a PR from that. So it's a kind of a nice, you can be working on things much more easily in parallel, which I guess we're going to be all doing now, right? Because you're kind of waiting for the agent to do the work.
100%, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So here we can see the principles here, right? I've got basics like red green development in, so TDD is proving really valuable with this kind of quality code. We're looking for 80% code coverage. I've told it to prioritize security, reliability, and maintainability, because this is a long-lived application, right? I'm letting it know I'm not just vibe coding something here, right? This is about quality. And then I told it about existing design patterns, right? Follow the existing design patterns. Don't come and create your own thing. This is a kind of established project. So I think the kind of things to think about, even before we get into using tooling around context. So because we've got this Sonar plugin, but actually on the work tree, it's not configured yet. So I need to quickly configure it. And so today I found this super cool side panel where I can open a terminal, which is super nice. And in fact, if I look, I'm in a work tree. Yep, so hopefully that's our new work tree that it's created. And so if I say Sonar integrate Codex, it will integrate Codex on this branch. So sometimes it will come back and say you need to auth first, but it's remembered the auth. So I'm going to integrate at project level. So we can see I've got an option to do a global or a project level, but I think project level is better because I want it just to run here. So it's given me a few options in the plugin. Do I want to install secret scanning hooks? Absolutely. So this means that every time I save a file, it will check it for a secret. And in fact, on a pre-commit, it will check it for a secret. And so it won't let me commit any secrets, which is super valuable. Do I want to install an agentic analysis hook? And again, yes. And so that means every time I save a file, it's going to run analysis on that file to see if I create some new issues, which is kind of useful. And we'll see that working in a bit. Do I want to install secrets on read instructions? So that's basically saying every time it reads a file, check it for secrets. I'm not going to do that here because I trust this project. If I was working on an untrusted project that maybe somebody had just vibe coded, I would put that on because I wouldn't want it to read secrets and then send that up to the model, right? So if you're kind of careful, if you're careful in that kind of thing, do that. So I'm going to say no to that. I will install the MCP server, which some It gives me a few extra skills that aren't in the CLI yet, but the rest is working for the CLI. And then absolutely, I will install context augmentation, which is the thing that is going to do the architectural stuff that we've got. And that now runs through the CLI, not through the MCP. So if you've used earlier versions of that, that'll be through the MCP. So that's it done. It's all configured. It's asking me just to test the commit hook for secrets, and ask me to try to commit a secret, see if it works. I'm not going to do that now because I know it works. That is now configured. So let me close that, and then let's explore the architecture a bit. So, so I'm going to say use Sonar to describe the top level architecture. Oh my gosh, I can't spell. Luckily it can spell for me. I'm just going to say, actually, I'll just say only Sonar, because actually it will try a whole load of different methods. So I'm kind of restricting it here. And let's see that this working. So this is working with a context augmentation. It's got a dependency tree, right? So rather than have to search through and grep the file system to try to work out the file texture, it's just pulling this dependency tree back, right? And so straight away, super fast, it's got me a nice top level architecture. I can see the dependencies. And so there's visible dependencies here, and then it's also got the intended architecture. So, you know, when we were looking at the project before, it was like, these are the constraints that we're enforcing here. So it's picked that up as well, and it can see the two map. And so it's saying architecturally, this API is the stable core. The other kind of modules are kind of supporting modules. So, so let's just say use Sonar to tell me more about the API. And actually, if I do, I'm doing for safety here, I'm saying use Sonar. If I didn't say use Sonar, it would probably use Sonar for this as well, because it self-discovers these tools, right? It knows from the description what the tools are. But for demo purposes, I'm trying to keep my odds of it doing what I want. But I think your point earlier that actually you give the agent the tools and it makes the choices of whether it's using them, whether it's useful in that situation, right? Because in a small project, it might just be quicker to read the files. On a big complex project like this, it really makes sense to get the architecture back properly. So yeah, if we actually look at the commands it's running here, we can see it's running Sonar context architecture get current, depth 5, and it's starting to search on signatures. So it's looking for files and pulling those back. I won't open all of these, but we'll see. It's now navigating around by kind of signatures rather than having to hit file systems. So yeah, it's pulled me back a nice API shape. It's talking about the flow. Here's the core concepts. So if I was a new developer on this project, this would be great, right? I've already got an accurate piece, and it's done it quickly because it's using a dependency graph rather than a thing. Okay, so that's cool. Any thoughts on that, VB, before I move on to the next bit?
Yeah, I think just one part is that this goes back to the principle of really using tools to your benefit, right? Like just the fact that you can, before even developing something, you can just sit with an agent and have a nice graphical user interface where you can understand what the information flow is, what your data flow is, and how things are related to each other. This is like truly underrated. I feel like just as a society, we've over-indexed on the fact that you can write code quickly, but people don't like index on the fact that you can spend some time really sitting with a problem and try and understand why things are the same way. And you can actually, to the contrary, use these tools to sort of help you get that understanding in way.
Cool. All right. So that's the architecture. Context has this thing around guidelines, right? So if you're working on a certain area, it will come back with guidelines. And these guidelines are based on kind of past experience on this project, right? So if I go for the overall Sonar guidelines, it will kind of look at the most kind of raised issues on this project to make sure they're avoided, right? So the most raised issues on this will probably follow constant naming conventions, close resources properly, and in fact, we'll probably see that, and avoid duplicated string rituals. So it's kind of telling the telling the agent to avoid these issues because it will pick them up and it knows there's a lot. But also you could say, what are the logging guidelines, right? So say the agent was about to do some logging, right? What would it pull there? And so again, this is just pulling. At the moment, this is just pulling back logging issues that have happened in the past. And it's interesting though. I think in the future we might actually start pulling back. You actually want more. What should logging look like here? But there's some guidelines here, right? Do not log sensitive information. Do not enable debugging. So this is the kind of it's communicating the standard that's expected on this project, right? If you're using SonarQube, so that's super nice. Cool. Okay, so that's that. So we're taking a bit of time here. So I'm now going to set it off on a bigger task, right? So let's do a refactoring. So let's run this command here, because we know everything is working well. So we're going to create a new shared module, right? That's basically going to remove some of the duplication in this project. And let's see how that runs. So I think this is a sort of typical complex refactoring task that you don't want to break anything, right? And you want it to be super careful to make sure the architecture is good. So this is something where Sonar context is really useful for agents. In fact, we've done some research recently that shows these are the kind of the tasks where it is the most beneficial. We'll share more about that soon. But yeah, so we can see, let's have a look. So what's it doing? So already it's jumping back in, it's getting guidelines, it's starting to search with the navigation using, so I didn't ask it to use Sonar tools there, right? It's also looking at the POM as well. It wants to check there. And it's starting to read some files now as well, right? So it will use both tools. So I'm probably not going to wait for this to run. We'll kind of look at, in Blue Peter Star, here's one we did earlier. So I've done a couple of versions of this. So this was one that I did earlier with Sonar. And so we can see I've done the same things here. And we can see here now, as you go through, you can see as well, as it's coding, it says Sonar found several issues on touch callers, deprecated timestamps, So as it's coding, Sonar is finding issues. And in fact, on the past one, you can't see exactly, like it loses the information of how that happened, but you can see, oh, look here, the new test triggered Sonar's duplicated literal rule, right? So it's fixing, in that traditional developer principle, fix the issues as soon as possible. It's fixing as it's coding, and it's kind of learning that. So it did, even though it had the guidelines, it still created a few issues, but it would have created less issues than if it hadn't had those guidelines, but then it's quite quickly fixed those issues straight away. And then, yeah, so this one was a good one, and it came through green. I asked it at the end, what Sonar tools did you use? So it used the guidelines, it used the navigation, and then it did an agentic analysis. And that's our new analysis tool. It's super fast and super accurate, right? It's supporting more languages now. Yeah, and so these were the analysis findings it had at the end, and it was all good. So that was a good one. And I really like this VB in here. You can go straight to the PR. I created a PR at the end, and you can see the actual results of the PR jobs as well, which is super nice directly here. And actually, I did one cheekily without using Sonar to see what would happen. And obviously, it still works out. It takes a little bit longer, right? It still works out the architecture. It doesn't find the issues as it's going. And so when you actually go here, it's picked up, actually the Sonar Cloud analysis failed, as we might expect. And so actually, if we jump into this PR, and I knew that was going to come up on a different window. Let's go into the PR. So here's the PR. In fact, it only done 60%, 50% coverage, and actually failed on the reliability rating. So we can jump through to Sonar here. And there's the issues it had. So let's have a look at some of those issues. So this is a typical one, right? So Sonar has cognitive complexity, and often agents will write quite complex code, overly complex code, right? We see that naturally. It's not hugely, like threshold is 15, and it came back at 17. But if you look at it, it's quite a long function. As a human, I'm like, the agents are fine with this, but as a human, I'm like, it could be a bit clearer. So this is one area where we can use our AI code fix. So hopefully with the agentic tools, we don't have issues to fix in the PR. If we do have issues to fix in the PR, there are tools then to fix them. So the AI code fix, which is using a GPT model behind the scenes, will generate a fix for this. So let's see that run. And this will basically suggest it and allow us to just open it in the IDE as well, if we were using an IDE. So that's going to run super slowly because we're on a demo. There we go. So it's kind of changed that large function and suggested we replace this. So the developer, if the developer wanted to manually do this, he could manually do this. I think we're already moving beyond that, right? With the agents doing everything. So there is an alternative way to do this. So if we go to issues, and in fact, if we select, say, all of the issues in this PR, and we can then hit a button that says, go and fix this with the agent. Now, the button isn't there because I've already fixed them in a thing. So we can see this PR here. I created this before the demo. And so this is actually the agent, which is GPT. I think it's the latest GPT, has gone and fixed all these issues and created a PR for them, right? So these were like, try without resources. It's doing that. Yeah, and it's basically add. So the developer, when he's reviewing the PR, can also review these fixes, roll these back into the original PR, then review the overall PR. So we're actually seeing the kind of remediation side as well, if the agent lets anything through. But hopefully with the agentic tools, actually all the new code is kind of clean. So I talked quite a lot there, VB. Any questions? Any comments?
No, first of all, this is amazing. Like I just, every time I see, like an out in the wild sort of example of both Codex as well as what good tools can do together, it just, it's just very heartwarming for me to see, right? But
Yeah.
Couple of things to sort of like point out here, and as you went through, like I thought about it, is that I really like the way that you've built the plugin itself, right? Just the fact that you have these really nice and nifty hooks, which are looking at each and every potential step where things could go wrong, and try and be proactive and flag those issues, is really good, right? A concrete example of this is that, let's say you're working with coding agents and you haven't configured your project properly, right? This could be the case for a new project or something like that. And let's say you're working with a bunch of N files and you have your keys. You want to make sure that the coding agent doesn't accidentally publish those keys, right? And so that's where like using hooks quite properly, right? Like hooks within Codex, again, in this case with Sonar, wherein it scans each and everything that has happened in the turn before or in the tool call before, is sort of like, super helpful, right? I think more on sort of like safety and security side, the only other thing that I would point out is sometimes that I would, pretty much all the times that I would use, is this thing called auto approve, which essentially, as the model goes, of course, the model needs to run bunch of tools. The model needs to run, the linters, the model needs to create new files, the model needs to test new files, the model needs to connect to a bunch of things. And a lot of these things are benign in nature, meaning that you should just let the model do it. So instead of sort of living in the world wherein you're approving each and every tool call, you want to be a bit smart about it. So you want the model to be able to sort of, auto approve certain benign, low risk tool calls, and then escalate like really high risk tool calls, like, hey, like I'm gonna send an email, hey, I'm gonna push this commit onto, like this new repo, I'm gonna send this, thing XYZ to another person. That's where you want to be aware about what's happening, right? And that's where auto approve sort of like becomes complementary to what you just showed, and gives you even more control, especially when running long running tasks and so on.
Yeah, I think that's one of the frustrations of a lot of developers. They're constantly going, yes, and I think the smart auto approve tools are going to be critical, right? And I think that's something that's fairly new and it's been good. It's cool. All right. So I don't think we've got any questions from the audience yet. If there's any questions, please add them in the Q&A tab. Somebody's just said Claude is down. That's all right. What an opportunity to use Codex. But yeah, we obviously have Dennis on if we don't. So I guess in absence of any questions, I think the final bit is where do you see this going next, Phoebe? What's coming?
Obviously I have drank a lot of Kool-Aid, right? So, but like trying to be unbiased, I feel like we're already in many ways living in the future, right? As we sort of alluded to at the start, probably the way that you and I were coding at the start of this year is now much different than 6 months in. And I suspect 6 months from now it would be a lot more different, right? And something that I am personally quite excited about is pushing these agents to really run sort of autonomously really long running tasks, and just like go after it and sort of be proactive enough to sense whatever changes have happened, automatically sort of change things as they're going through and so on and so forth. And that's the direction which I would love to push these models towards, right? Also at the same time, one of my colleagues on the Codex team says this quite often, is that coding is kind of like the easy part, right? You can verify coding, but there's like so many different sort of industries, tasks which are very open-ended, right? And so sort of like in like a loop situation wherein you can verify what the output is, there is like a one to many or like one to two or like one to one sort of output. That was sort of like the easy bit. Like I'm quite excited about how do we connect these systems to even more sort of external systems which don't have like a one-to-one output mapping, right? So that's what I'm quite sort of like excited about. And I would what do you think? Like where do you think this is headed as well?
Yeah, I think there's I suspect it's going to keep changing, right? And it's not going to look like it does now. I think, like you say, these kind of agentic loops are really interesting for the more trivial tasks. They just and that was a big part of most developers' life, right? They wouldn't get to do the fun stuff very often, right? It was like, oh my gosh, give me a greenfield project, so I don't have to fix all these bugs, right?
Yeah.
I love the idea that we can just have agents working through that fairly mundane stuff, and with the right verification loop, we can do that reliably. So it requires very little human interaction, right? I think that will be great for developers, and then that leaves the developers to do the more interesting stuff, right? To work on designs, work on kind of setting standards, work on really sort of high level interactions with the agents, where you're really thinking about stuff carefully and working through different problems, trying different things, and then that will really help us innovate, right? I guess that's ultimately it, right? We can get rid of the chores, hopefully, and then spend more time on actual innovation, and that actually then helps kind of AI then really benefits what we do, right? Rather than just automating and reducing costs, but actually letting us do more interesting things. So yeah, I think that's hopefully where it's going. That will be good, and yeah, certainly tools like this are really helpful. But yeah, it's what the life cycle is going to look like. I think that's also interesting as applications will become, there'll be more threats on applications, right? On the side of security, and expectations will get higher, right? Hopefully software will improve. I think that's a really nice thought, right? So many systems, you still look at them and you go, oh, this is painful, right? Hopefully this then brings stuff forward. So actually those painful systems get modernized, and those organizations can afford to do that. I think that will be great. So yeah, I think it's going to be fun. So our agent finished right in the original task while we were showing the other ones, and it looks quite similar, right? We've got it's created a things, it used Sonar tools in the same kind of way, and then from here we could just create a pull request, right? So this magic of this, name it a nice branch. What should we call it? So live demo refactor.
Yeah, you can also, by the way, set these up in your settings. If you just want to have like certain conventions, for example, on our repos, we have a convention that the CI only runs if you've got a dev / branch name, and so on. So you can like configure that quite easily. But yeah, it's just so magical to just like click a button, you've got the PR up, and CI is already running, and so on. Love it.
Exactly. Yeah. So I've done no review of this code at all. I've just created the PR, which perhaps is what I wouldn't do. I think there's some nice review tools there as well, right? That I could have done with Codex.
Yeah.
I've skipped that bit. But yeah, it's going to just create that PR for creating the branch. There we go. Live demo reactor. Poor spelling. I'll stay there forever now. And it's pushing that, creating the PR, and then it will start. Sonar will start running on that PR for the outer loop checks. There we go. And we can see that's running. Super cool. All right. We're pretty much on the hour. We've got 2 minutes to go. It doesn't look like we had any questions. I hope I didn't miss any. I think there's a survey at the end. Oh, hold on. VB. Oh, there is a couple of questions on the chat.
Mm-hmm.
By the end of 2026, what percentage of developers do you think will stop writing code themselves entirely? As we know, that number right now is beyond 50 already.
I don't know what that number right now is, but I think the way I see it as not in terms of who writes code and who doesn't, but I feel like the right sort of metric to think about is like what percentage of people would benefit from code written by these agents, right? And I would say like sort of 6 months down the line or end of 2026. That percentage of number would be like significantly more than what it is right now. I don't want to sort of like say that I don't write as much code anymore. I do sort of still have like some hobby projects just to feel something. I would just, write something in Rust, or like recently I was playing around with Zig. That's just out of curiosity, but I do have a lot more trust on these agents now, and I feel like that trust level that people have with tools like Sonar Source would continue sort of increasing by the end of 2026.
Cool. All right. I just see one more question here about SonarQube. Question. So they're on server. AI code fix is nice, but only shows for certain issues. How was that determined? I think there was some kind of been some benchmarks done on which ones it was effective with, but we are bringing more of these features to server later in the year. So you'll see the full gambit coming. I won't commit to any dates right now, but that's coming. Cool. And Dennis has said this question is better asked on the community forum. So yeah, okay, thank you, Dennis. Cool. I think we better wrap up because we are on the hour. But thank you so much, VB. That was a fascinating chat. I think we could have done 2 hours, but I'm not sure anyone else would.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to maybe chatting like 3 months down the line and just see where we're at. I'm personally quite bullish on where we're going together, and thank you so much for having me on, and thank you everyone for joining.
Well, thank you for coming. It's been great to have somebody and to be able to chat about this. It was super interesting. So yeah, let's book a date in 3 months' time again. We'll do it again.
Yeah, amazing.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Cheers.